everyone. Please, can you rise for the procession?
Please be seated. Good evening, members of the Rectorate, deans, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, alumni, and friends, donors, partners, and advisory board members of the faculty, and those joining us via live stream. I must extend a special welcome to the friends and family of Professor Rika Preiser, specifically her son Richard, co-parent and Wolfpack elder Wolfgang, siblings Gordon, Marina, Dion and his wife Mariana in person, and Anne and Johan online. While not with us, we celebrate her parents, Carl and Queenie Allen, who passed away 10 years ago, for raising such a formidable, compassionate, and resilient individual. Many of her friends and collaborators are joining us online, namely Brian Arthur, Complexity Co-Explorer in the USA, Hannah and Anelia in Canada, Mish, Melanie, Corbus, and Frederick in the UK, Jean in the UK, and others in the Complexity Reading Group, Anna in Portugal, Sebastian in Berlin, and Gertie in Rotterdam. Welcome. It is my honor to welcome you to Stellenbosch University and to the professorial inaugural lecture of Professor Rika Preiser, co-incumbent of the UNESCO Chair in Complexity and Transformative African Futures in the Center for Sustainability Transitions within the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences. A professorial lecture is one of the most meaningful occasions in the life of an academic and our faculty. It is a moment in which we celebrate not only the achievements of a scholar, but also the contribution that scholarship makes to society. It provides an opportunity to reflect on the question, ideas and commitments that have shaped an academic career, and to recognize the impact that those ideas have had on the world around us. This evening's lecture could hardly be more relevant to the times in which we live. Across the globe, societies are wrestling with profound uncertainty and rapid change. Climate change, biodiversity loss, inequality, and geopolitical instability increasingly remind us that the challenges we face are interconnected and complex. These realities require new ways of thinking, new forms of collaboration, and perhaps most importantly, the willingness to question long-held assumptions about how the world works. It is within this context that Professor Preiser's work has made such a significant contribution not only to academia, but specifically to the faculty and its mission of impacting not only the economy, but in service to society as a whole. What I find particularly compelling about Rika's work is its sense of possibility, vulnerability, and creativity. Throughout her scholarship, she is committed not only to understanding complexity, but also to exploring how societies can imagine and create more just, regenerative, and sustainable futures. Her work invites us to see differently, think differently, and ultimately act differently. In reflecting on her own academic journey, Professor Preiser has spoken about the importance of changing the lenses through which we view the world. That idea runs throughout her scholarly work and is beautifully captured in the title of tonight's lecture, Worlds in the Making. It reminds us that the future is not something that simply happens to us. Rather, it is something that is continually shaped through our relationships, actions, choices, and imagination. Rika, we congratulate you on this important milestone. We thank you for your scholarship, your intellectual leadership, and your contribution to helping us better understand both the complexity of the present and the possibilities of the future. We look forward to the insights you will share with us this evening. Thank you and welcome.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here this evening and celebrating this milestone with Rika. My name is Wensi Orenetbix, and I'm the co-director at the CST, so the Center for Sustainability Transitions, where Rika is based. And I've known Rika, I worked out for 18 years now, and I think many people in this room have even known her for much longer. And it's a real pleasure, I think, to be here this evening and just reflect on Rika's journey to this point. And I think something that is inspiring about Rika, also thinking about people's different journeys in this room, is that she's followed a very varied and unconventional pathway to this point. And this is just a point. I'm sure there are many more great things to come. But she actually started with studying physiotherapy and decided that was not quite for her, and then actually exited the studying and the academy, and first worked in the music industry for almost a decade, but then decided that she actually wants to return to academia and studying and her intellectual pursuits and follow her dream. And she started studying through UNISA, and in the end got a Bachelor of Arts in philosophy, communication studies, and industrial psychology. During this time, she also took a job in the university administration, working in various places around the university at Stellenbosch, both at the international office, in the Faculty of Health Sciences, and she completed 2 master's degrees, one in media and ethics through the Department of Journalism, and another one in organizational change and public culture at the Department of Sociology and Social Anthropology. And she did this all while working full-time and studying part-time. So a big inspiration, and I think also a sense of why Rika, I think, has a lot of empathy with students coming from a lot of different contexts and backgrounds, and is a real supporter of them and their journeys at the CST. A big turning point in her career, and I think many of us in our lives reflect on where there's an opportunity that opened up that somehow maybe changed our trajectory. And a big turning point for Rika was meeting Professor Paul Sillier, who she actually met, I understand, quite surreptitiously and bumped into him in a park in Germany. And then actually started working as a research assistant for Paul, and then decided to also pursue a PhD with him in the Department of Philosophy. And there also discovered really an intellectual home and a space that she found very interesting and wanted to pursue further. And her scholarship, I think, from that time onwards until now was deeply influenced and shaped by Paul's work on complexity, ethics, and philosophy. And her PhD examined the problem of complexity and the role of critique. And she completed her PhD in 2012, unfortunately just a year after Paul's untimely passing. And Jani Hofmeyer and Anton van Niekerk were her co-supervisors and also helped support her through to the end of that PhD journey. I think also in reflecting on different people's pathways sort of through life, I think this post-PhD period is also another critical period in kind of the pathway you end up. And I think in the case of Rika, this also followed a somewhat unconventional trajectory. So she'd been working as a research assistant at the the Center for Studies in Complexity, and then she was kind of just completing her PhD when the version 1 of the CST, so it was called the Center for Complex Systems in Transition, was getting going. And Rika was really one of the core people in the center that helped provide that initial energy. And I think she was really involved in some of the early grants at the center. And partly, at least in my experience, she was working quite closely with me and really helped co-lead several of those early grants from CEDA and USAID. Luckily, USAID was still existing then. And I think that period was really instrumental in actually establishing the CST and building up a team there. I think also a particular contribution that Rika made was playing a key role in helping develop the kind of bigger thinking around futures thinking, particularly within the Seeds of Good Anthropocenes project. And that's now kind of been taken up and used worldwide. But Rika was really one of the pioneering people working together with Tanya, her co-chair, and it was, I remember, many very fun evenings and days drinking wine and brainstorming and developing these ideas. I think also significant to mention is Rika's intellectual leadership and contribution in co-leading the first methods handbook on social-ecological systems research, and I think actually Rika was the one who particularly proposed the idea that this would be really useful, and work closely with myself and Alta de Vos and a bigger international team of authors. She's also continued to bring in a number of grants, and I think recently has done some really interesting work on youth and systemic justice, also on disruptors and enablers of research for development. And I think these have really been big contributions to the research trajectory and agenda at the CST. Also then, just to reflect that she's played very significant roles in actually building the teaching programs at the CST. Rika took over the complexity and systems thinking module from Paul Sillier after he passed away and has continued to lead and build that module. But she's also been taking leadership on a large number of other modules and has helped to revise and reshape all of the postgraduate programs at the CST. She leads the master's program, but I think has also been very instrumental in helping us think broadly about how to position and align our postgraduate programs, so the PGDip and the PhD and the master's, to really be cutting edge international programs. And she's taught at many places around campus, I think at the business school, in agri-sciences. I think probably various people have encountered her over the years in a number of spaces. Then also just to acknowledge that Rika is one of the people at the CST with the largest supervision load, so she's really got a very large and diverse set of students, and I think who really look up to her and are inspired by also what she represents, and she really supports her students. And they work on very diverse topics, including social-ecological systems, but also African knowledge systems, poetry, music, embodied practice, and transformative learning. She's graduated 4 PhDs and 22 master's students, and has published more than 40 papers and contributed to as a co-editor of more than 3 books. So I think also being a very kind of core academic at the CST. So her current work, which I assume we'll kind of hear a little bit more about how her research has shaped in her lecture, but really focuses on relational practices. And as Riza, Prof Daniels mentioned, she was awarded the UNESCO Chair in Complexity and Transformative African Futures in 2022, together with Tanya Hishut. And that is also a kind of unconventional setup because Tanya is a scenarios or futures practitioner. So they have a very interesting kind of co-chair model. And this chair has now been extended to 2030, and I think provides a really strong institutional platform for building the next phase of Rika's career and her unique contribution to the CST. So just to conclude, I think what I really appreciate about Rika is that she's always able to see things from a new and a fresh and a different perspective. And I think often to reframe things. So she's also the person in the meeting or the room that often asks the question that sort of upsets the whole trajectory of how we were thinking about things, and questions all the assumptions, and then helps us rethink things. And often it actually resets the trajectory and the solution. And she's also really good at making plans during a crisis. So if there's a crunch and something needs to be sorted out, Rika is there. So just for that, I also just want to say on behalf of the CST, a really big thank you for the big contribution, and I think also very special and rich contribution that you make to the CST. And we really look forward to this next phase of your career. And if I look at the past and the interesting roads you've taken, I'm sure there's many more interesting things to come. So thanks so much, Rika.
Thank you very much, Unsi, for that extremely generous introduction. I'm speechless, and many of you will know that if Unsi is on your side, you're supported for life. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It's an honor and a privilege to deliver my inaugural lecture at Stellenbosch University, and especially within the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences, where I found an academic community and an intellectual home, which is something any student, wandering student, should be thankful and grateful for. So it's really a fantastic moment. All protocols observed. Thank you very much for everyone who's here. Thank you so much for the support from the faculty. Jonathan, Dale, Amira. I've never had such support. My lectures and my slides have never been done a week before any talk. You can ask anyone who's worked with me. I do it the night before. So I felt very nervous that I put things on slides that maybe I wanted to change and I couldn't. So let's see what comes out of this. Thank you also to my family and friends who are here. It's lovely to have you with me. It's also very daunting to speak to people that know you from you were a child and now suddenly you're standing in front of them. Thank you so much for friends, loved ones that are online, and for all the support that you've sent me also through messages. I really appreciate you being online, and we'll miss you for the wine afterwards, because there's a lovely, lovely dinner waiting for us afterwards, or snacks. I feel like the origin story sits in the room here. It's very special to see everyone here. Yanni, Mark, thank you very much for being here with Unsi. Vasti, you precede all of them from the philosophy department. So thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. Part of the journey. Very special. So the talk tonight is also quite nerve-wracking, because many of you have heard what I probably will be saying and what Unsi has already said. But I thought there might be people that are new to the space, and especially listening in also. So that it'll be a little bit of a combination of things that you might have heard before. I'm not sure there will be too many new things, and I will combine a little bit of reading just to calm my nerves down. And free speaking, and there'll be a parallel process happening here, of course. So there'll be what you have in the book in front of you, which were my thoughts and my ideas, and I also thought for the students especially, that is really a little bit of complexity day 1 and 2 of the complexity module written up for you to take home. And for those of you who are interested in these ideas and the references at the back, and I won't be reading the book, Bernadette, don't worry. But the talk will follow the logic of what's in the handout, but the pictures will maybe say something different. So I was thinking, and I was studying how many other people do their inaugural lectures, and I see that many people tell a very personal story, and many others tell a very evidence-based, data-driven story. And I thought I will have a little bit of a combination where my slides have little hidden icons and clues in for each of you with whom I've worked. So I hope that many of the pictures that I've put on the slides are my own pictures. And it's not to say how grand I can take photos, but I might have been with some of you when those pictures or photos might have been taken. And that was special for me to have them there. So, yeah, just a little bit of a clue or a legend to what's going to happen here. And of course, what's on the slides, what's in the paper, and in the handbook might just change also at the same time, and that might not be new for any of you. Yeah. So I've got my timer going. So maybe to start more formally, I would like to say that the subject of my lecture speaks to a question that has shaped much of my academic work, which is really in very deeply, and it was really interesting to think about this over the last few weeks. How might we think, act, and live responsibly in a world characterized by complexity, uncertainty, and profound interdependence? And to demonstrate my interdependence, I brought on our more than human allies with us, our plants, our rocks, our animal kin in the little glass vase in front of me. This belongs in our classes when we teach, and we acknowledge that we are never alone in the spaces where we operate and move and think and work with each other. This is interdependence for me. And it's in that spirit and with great appreciation that your presence here this evening, that I invite you to join me in exploring worlds in the making. So how do we respond to a world characterized by interconnection and change? That's the question, I think the million-dollar question. If you open your LinkedIns every day, people have ideas of what that looks like and what's the next thing that you could do, 10 of this, 5 of that, 3 points of this, and the latest of that. And I hope that we can move beyond that tonight. I'd like to, first clue, read from a book by Dr. Ella Manga called Umoya, which is the Nguni language for breath or wind or spirit. To set the scene for this question as well. So the question really that she inquires into is to say that in this time of polycrisis and where people have all these challenges coming at us, we often kind of hanker back to the quick fixes and the easy answers. There's always an idea that we shouldn't be sitting in the difficult spaces when we want to do something different. She says to make our way through the great trouble and polycrisis of our time, climate change, human rights abuses, wars, pandemics, and mental health crisis, requires a disruptive reorientation and recalibration of our hearts and minds, a journey to new ground from which to relate to others, each other's, ourselves, and the planet, a place from which to hold paradox and impermanence, to find meaning, refresh our vision, and to navigate unrelenting waves of change. And that's what I hope that we can explore a little bit tonight, is whether, and this is what my research is about, and I think the journey for me is really to say that for me, being able to live with complexity or to move with complexity is this possibility to reorient ourselves and to recalibrate how we think and how we do things with each other as we participate in shaping worlds that are always in the making. So with that kind of in mind, how do we interact with that? I'll kind of just go back to where it begins. We often assume that academics were born with their noses in books, or that becoming a professor is the inevitable outcome of a childhood spent reading. My story began differently. For those of you who knew me when I was a bit younger, at school I was known as the runner, not as the reader. Running was where I excelled, and my sporting achievements really shaped my identity at school. No one, myself included, imagined that I would one day become an academic, or that I could even sit still long enough to read anything. My love of reading came much later, and I found this picture because for those of you who've seen and have ran with me, you will also know that I always fall when I run as well. Something with my left foot hitting the other leg. So we'll move on from that. Learning to read the world. One of the books that changed both the way I saw the world and in many ways my relationship with reading itself is the book from Theodore Zeldin called An Intimate History of Humanity. Zeldin explores timeless human experiences in his book about what it means to work, to love, what is friendship, loneliness, rejection, power and curiosity. And in chapters with titles like How Some People Have Acquired Immunity to Loneliness, or Why Has There Been More Progress in Cooking Than in Love, he explores how conversations, relationships, curiosity and imagination shape who we become and the worlds we create together. His work shows that writing and scholarship is not only the explaining of the world, it can also bring change in how we understand the world. And to quote from his book, that's on the screen there, these two passages is what probably will be the core of going forward here tonight as well. What we make of other people and what we see in the mirror when we look at ourselves depends on what we know of the world, what we believe to be possible, what memories we have, and whether our loyalties are to the past, the present, or the future. I want to show, he says, how priorities are changing today and what sort of spectacles are needed to observe them. In the course of history, humans have repeatedly changed the spectacles through which they have looked at the world and themselves. The image of the changing spectacles became a powerful metaphor for me, and so even long before I encountered the language of systems thinking or complexity, I already suspected that understanding the world depends not so much on seeing more as it does on seeing differently. Years later, Paul Celier's work on complexity and ethics sharpened this insight, and complexity did not offer me another theory. It changed the spectacles through which I could view the world. So a little bit of Philosophy 101, what you will encounter in our lectures, and I'll go very quickly through this. And there's a little bit of a runner-up to this, is an example of how we have often changed the spectacles of how we see the world, is an example of the history of what happened, I would say, in Western science, and the kind of the insights that we've had through that, not only just through that. I would say this image in front here, what you see now, is an image where the Earth is in the center of the universe, and then kind of to the picture to the right, you see the sun at the center of the universe. And this depicts really one of the very first shifts that we've encountered in the history of knowledge making. So Ptolemy was an Egyptian mathematician and philosopher, round about, I would say, 2 in the Common Era, so about 2,000 years ago. And for about 1,000 years, his ideas that he had, that the Earth is the center of the universe, was the model according to which people understood the world and created everything around that. And it's only about, I would say 1,000 years after him that Copernicus kind of came up with this idea that maybe the sun is the center of the universe. And a few years, or a century or what later, Galileo Galilei's telescope and scientists or scholars those days who were playing with lenses and glass and being able to cut them in different ways and observe things differently, confirmed, yes, that indeed the sun is the center of the universe and all the other planets navigate around the sun. This was a huge shift and actually opened up the questioning of all knowledge that there was at that time. It is the start of the Enlightenment. And the kind of questions that came out of the Enlightenment. Recently, I was very fortunate to visit Florence, and there's the Galileo Museum in Florence. And if you walk around there, you see that the tools with which they measured and observed weren't small little things. These were huge things, and they were kind of proliferated also. And very serious measuring going around there. So being able to kind of see that changing the lenses and the tools that we have to observe the world really gives us a different situatedness of how we question who we are, how we see ourselves in the world, and what we think is possible about the world. This opening and this kind of being able to perceive different realities, like I said, gave way for what we call these days the Newtonian clockwork universe and enlightenment, where there was a shift from explaining reality through myths and stories, but rather through methodologies and equations. And this gave us yet another view of the world, which is that the world is one that works like a clockwork with mechanic precision, and that the world is stable, and that we can actually measure the world in a specific way. And if we have enough knowledge and enough tools or enough data, we will understand everything in the world. And as we see, this worldview enabled extraordinary scientific and technological achievements, but it also encouraged a lasting expectation that we had from this world, which is that sufficient knowledge would allow us to predict, optimize, and control the world. What we see after that, another shift, a few hundred years later, I would also say, is the shift to what I call a quantum or dynamic universe. A third major shift here was with the theory of general relativity of Albert Einstein. And as Carlo Rovelli beautifully explains in his book, 7 Lessons on Physics, he showed that space and time themselves are not fixed at all, but can bend and change in response to matter and energy. This is usually what I try and teach my students as well. When you have an essay to submit, you can change and bend time. It's possible. Most important skill to have is be able to change and bend time. Edwin Hubble's telescope observation later showed that distant galaxies were moving apart, providing evidence that the universe itself was expanding. Together, these insights changed our view of the universe from a fixed container to something dynamic and constantly evolving. Quantum physics provided evidence that reality cannot be understood as fixed, separate entities or building blocks, but as patterns of probability and interactions whose patterns depend on how they relate and measured. So, and this is where I want to kind of set up the story for complexity to land and to understand why complexity isn't just another theory, but actually a different way of seeing the world that allows us also to explore differently. So I would say that the third really big shift is the shift from understanding the world as being made up of atoms to the world as being constituted through relations. And this conceptual movement is from static objects, understanding that what it is that we study, that our objects of study isn't the building blocks of reality, but the processes themselves that allow the building blocks to emerge. And this is where the work of Yanni has been very important and also beautiful to explain to us the processes and giving a language to that in systems biology. So from this perspective, reality is no longer just a collection of things, but or an empty container. It is an unfolding process in which matter, energy, space, and time are dynamically related. So what I've just taken you through was a journey of worldview shifts. And once you encounter a shift in your worldview, the world never remains the same for you. You cannot unsee the world when you've had a radical change of a worldview. And this kind of 19th century wooden depiction of the shepherd sticking his head through the firmament of the earth is for me such a beautiful metaphor or image of what happens when you reach the ends or the limits of what you knew to be true and real. And once you stick your head through that moment, like I say, you can't unsee the world. And many of us might have had these in our personal lives or through a scientific encounter or some other kind of encounter that you've had. Something shifted in what you thought was real. And that usually has a profound impact and influence on the rest of your life. So knowing that this happens in science and that this is what our scientific explorations job is to allow us, to kind of make these shifts and to enlarge our worlds and to get new knowledge, is what really excites me about understanding complexity and the opportunities it brings. So when you start reading up on complexity and systems thinking, usually authors will write and say it offers the acknowledgement of a paradigm shift from a classical Newtonian scientific understanding of the world to a world where process, organization, and interaction becomes the main thing. And this is what it offers within the field of science. And I've here, on this slide, I've kind of summarized this scientist from the UK, Brian Castellani. He's actually mapped out the development of the study or the field of systems thinking and complexity. And you can see this field in itself is already very complex and interconnected. So it is a field of study that emerges through a truly interdisciplinary engagement around how we understand the interactions and the relations of the world. And you will see it started around about the 1950s, after the Second World War, when scientists started collaborating. I would say from the 1950s onward, a diverse group of scientists working across disciplines began to argue that understanding reality required more than identifying the constituting building blocks. We have people like Ludwig van Bertalanffy's general systems theory, the cybernetics movement by Norbert Wiener, Ilya Prigogin's work on dissipative structures, Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis, John Holland's studies of complex adaptive systems, and Donena Meadows' systems dynamics, and many other scholarly contributions. And I had to name these names for the people online who was listening, because if you're a systems thinker or a complexity scholar, these are the people that might have shaped your field. And depending on what field you're coming, one of those people would be your hero in a sense. And I couldn't leave out any of those names. So, and there's a few others that I didn't mention here. Sociologist John Urey described this development of complexity as the complexity term within the field of science itself, suggesting that this shift was being introduced from thinking in terms of stable structures and linear causes towards understanding emergence, feedback, nonlinearity, and continual becoming. This shift didn't just happen within these fields, but as you can see, similar shifts were taking place across many disciplines: ecology, economics, biology, organizational studies, sustainability science, and increasingly the world appears less like a machine from this perspective and more like a living, adaptive, and organic process that we have to deal with and have to change our lenses to try and study and capture this. So this new worldview that complexity and systems thinking brings to us, it has consequences for all the questions we ask within science. It touches the question of what we believe is real, the theories that we study for when we want to understand these things, and that informs how we should act. This relational worldview, I would say, is a shift from assuming that the nature of the world is orderly, in stasis, pure and knowable, through the study of well-defined problems. And for those of you who do a lot of, I would say, well-defined problems, these are problems of optimization that we want to answer, efficiency, progress. And assuming, and what this relational worldview brings to us is knowing that if you work with reality, real things don't often, I would say, act in the way that those beautiful Newtonian marbles do. And the dad trying to emulate the Newtonian cradle there will soon find out that the balls will jump off and start crying and screaming. That's the shift that it brings to us, this way of thinking. It kind of takes away the assumption that we are working when we are studying, going out in the field, gathering our data, that we are not working with well-defined problems, but that we are working with living organisms, values, meaning, that changes the expectations we have of the things that we study. Just briefly to say that within the field of sustainability science, systems thinking has also influenced, for me, two major shifts, and I would say the notion of the Anthropocene is one of them. The Anthropocene is this acknowledgement that humans aren't just, stable structures on the earth that tread lightly and kind of live on the earth, but our presence on the earth actually shapes the natural systems of the earth. this introduction of this notion of the Anthropocene, I would say, is a key notion that is currently informing maybe not what we study as the Anthropocene itself, but this idea that humans and nature and humans' presence on the earth has severe consequences for how we think about our presence here. And for me, also the notion of the planetary boundaries framework that was introduced by Johan Rockstrom and his colleagues at Stockholm Resilience Center, and Unsi was part of this paper, is another key, I would say, worldview changer of the kind of challenges that we are facing. The planetary boundaries framework says that there are these boundaries that we encounter as the planet, and if we go over the criteria of those boundaries, we cannot go back to just fixing or jumping back and trying to fix the planet in a way. Once we cross these boundaries, the Earth becomes something different. There's no turning back from crossing those boundaries. So systems thinking, I would say, informed for me very deeply these two frameworks, which are very key and important in sustainability science today. Discovering complexity. I'm not going to say a lot about this. I just wanted to, I would say, have these pictures here as a key moment in my life, and Unsi has spoken about that. Discovering complexity was for me a Flammarian moment in my life, where I saw the world differently. Being able to meet Paul and Yanni and to work with them. In those days, in the early days of complexity science, it wasn't cool to study complexity. Both Yanni and Paul can tell you that they were thrown out of conferences. It was difficult to publish papers. Any of you who are doing research on fields that are outside and that challenge the established views, you will face difficulties. So we started, Paul and Yanni started the Center for Studies in Complexity in a time where it was kind of on the margins. And the work that we've done, we kind of collected, we started a reading group on Mondays, and people across the university came and sat with us, and we started reading together. And it was a wild bunch that came together to try and understand complexity. But it's in these moments, I think, that we started realizing that the questions of complexity was often also asked by people working in the field of sustainability science. Our encounters with Mark confirmed that. If you work in sustainability, you work with stakeholders or planners or government agencies who all have a specific idea of what a estuary or a water management system should look like. And they all bring with them different ideas of how to manage and govern that place. And often the kind of equally true but opposing truths and expectations that people have of what it might be to govern or to conserve or to develop felt for Mark and his team like something that is complex. So our conversations around shifted from studying complexity as just a theory or an idea, but something that can bring meaning and direction and orientation to people who are interested in studying complexity. So, like I said earlier, understanding this worldview isn't one that studies building blocks, but processes. And to just give you a definition, I have to do that here. A complex system is a set of entities, could be people, cells, molecules, interconnected in such a way that they produce a pattern of behavior over time. So that we don't see things in isolation anymore, but that we see a wetland, or your garden, or your pool, or your favorite space in nature as an ecology, as an interconnected set of things, and they show up as the pattern. Organizational structure, resilience, efficiency, also follows a structure or becomes a pattern rather than something individualistically. And with this image, I try to kind of just capture the movement and the process of what we should be following if we want to follow and understand these processes. So common to all studies on complexity are systems with multiple elements adapting or reacting to the patterns that these elements create. And if you start reading around that, you will see that there's a lot of publications touching many of the fields, and the authors of some of these books are online. And it's been wonderful to kind of also explore with them and through them what these ideas bring in the spaces where they work. Past complexity, there's the crossing for me personally into the social-ecological world. Once you understand that things are always interconnected, you can't just study ecology or the social world by itself. But the idea that there's a little hyphen between social ecological is extremely important in this sense. And if you start reading on the kind of sustainability research that we do, as we study sustainability from this perspective that social and ecological systems are interlinked systems. And as Unsi said earlier on, connecting with her, I think in 2009, was another moment of huge change for me. Suddenly I discovered that there's this scholars out there, these fields of researchers that are using complexity thinking to study sustainability in social ecological systems. Understanding that there was this movement within the field of sustainability, I think, gave me a different perspective and a different question to ask. Suddenly I wasn't interested anymore in asking what is it about complexity that I should develop, or what theories of complexity can I inquire into. Suddenly my research and my focused into what is it about complexity that can help or can support people who are doing social ecological systems thinking in a better way. The so whatness of it became more important for me than bringing in another theoretical framework. And I think that is the work that I've been doing, and that's found its home through the CST, is really trying to, I would say, translate between worlds in terms of what does it mean. What does it mean if we say that something is complex? What does it mean for scholars who are studying water governance system, electricity governance systems? If you wanted to do specific research on that, what is it that you have to do differently to capture the relations and the organization rather than our units, singular units of information? And that's, I think, where my work's really been. And I think a key moment for me was the paper with Unsi, Carl Foki, and Alta, where we kind of wanted to say to ourselves, for this scholars coming to this field, not all of us can kind of go through that elaborate, I would say, introduction of the worldview shift that I just gave you. If you wanted to just drop into this field of complexity thinking, what is the key few things that you need to know without having to study physics, maths, ecology, biology, and the whole jargon of sustainability? And we came up with these 6 features that I wanted to be able to draw in the sand if I sat somewhere with the community or spoke with someone and wanted to explain complexity in a way that was intuitive and, I would say, lived more than studied. So we came up with this idea to say that all complex systems come about through relations. And if you're interested in understanding the relations around you, you'd be able to study something about complexity. These systems are open, they're always influenced from the outside, they're always contextual. So last night, my son Richard was asking me, Mom, what's that bunny on your slide? But it depends on whether you see the bunny or the duck. And context matters, how we see things differently, and that is an important aspect of a complex systems. They're always adaptive, they can grow, they can learn, they're dynamic, and the complex causality that comes about is something very much different than a kind of a linear cause and effect that's there. And we've used this imagery, this language, to kind of, I would say, inform people around, so if that is what you want to study, what is the methods that you have to bring to that space? Like Unsi mentioned, the SES Methods Handbook is something that took 7 years from its idea to be developed. But through this handbook, we brought together 96 scholars in many different chapters with an idea of how to study social ecological systems from a complex adaptive perspective. And that handbook, I think, was a fantastic project to work on. It's also open access, and I think it's really become a space where students can kind of go to think about complexity from a perspective that isn't just jargon-based. Coming to the end, for me and for many people who study complexity, we're always interested in the so what question of it. What does it mean to say that we study complexity? What does it bring to you? What changes also for you? And for me, I think taking complexity seriously really requires, I would say, and this is looking back on what we have been doing, it takes the commitment of making worlds with others. If you're interested in studying complex systems, you can't do that by yourself. It means that we're interested in seeding future worlds, we're interested in innovation, and we're interested in reimagining the future in the places that we live. And here I've just tried to capture the many ways and the many colleagues that have made worlds with me, and in the many beautiful spaces that we've been able to work. And I've been really very fortunate to work with fantastic creative colleagues. And these ideas have also been influencing how we teach, what we bring to the space, how we honor space, how we honor each other, and we always try to humanize spaces where we go. But for me, this has been a fantastic journey, not one in isolation, the lone genius, but the one that collaborates and connects with others in a fantastic way. With the relational practices, we've been kind of exploring to say, well, if we can't change the infrastructure or the systems we're working with that quickly, we can maybe change something within ourselves and how we see each other. And there's some radical work that I've done with my colleagues Hannah and Mish on trying to explore how do we bring in art in our work and artful practices, work with food, work with interactions, and if we do these crazy, wonderful workshops, how do you actually write a paper about that? Also quite interesting and challenging, and it's been wonderful to have that also. And then going forward also, how do we translate these ideas into other knowledge spaces? What does it mean? How does ideas of complexity connect to indigenous knowledge that we have so deeply in Africa? And the huge similarities that there are with that. The Seeds of Good Anthropocene work that we've done, that Unsi mentioned, was one of the key ideas, I think, and the key streams of work that was also informed by complexity thinking. The idea is that the future isn't something that is linear and unfolding, but that time, thinking back about Einstein's idea of time, if we can stretch time, the future is also here with us at the moment. So we don't have to think of the future as something that's unreachable out there. And that idea kind of informed the Seeds of the Good Anthropocene project, which says that if we can, there's pockets of the future in the present. And by connecting with the innovations and the brilliance of these pockets of the future, we can bring change in a different way. So from a scenarios point of view, this really undermines, or I would say challenges, traditional ideas of scenario building, which really is a top-down process and a very linear thing. And through the Seeds of the Good Anthropocene project, we've created these participatory futures where we actually link with people and their brilliance and their genius that they bring to the everyday challenges that they face. And this brings me to the third commitment, which is working with Tanya on the UNESCO Chair of Transformative African Futures, which is really a journey into, I would say, connecting people in Africa to their own futures. And like Tanya said the other day also, only when Africans can start imagining their own futures for themselves and with themselves, this is when we're not going to be inheriting colonized futures from other places, where we've been kind of being told what a future should look like. And that's the work that we've been doing with the UNESCO chair. And working with Tanya, also who I met probably in 2010, also in one of the reading groups, has taught me, we come from futures from a different space. Tanya works with business leaders and government organizations. And she's got a few golden rules, but one of the golden rules is walk and the path will find you, and as you walk, the way will appear. So deeply we work through an emergent process always. And another golden rule is 3 gelatos a day keeps the doctor away. So if you ever have to do work with Tanya in Italy, be prepared to find your 3 gelatos a day, because that's the only way to stay sane. And I've learned that rule and I'm implemented, and I can tell you it works. What does all of this mean, serious about complexity, mean for the economic and management sciences? Within the field that we work, there are a number of inherited assumptions about our environments, that they are stable, that they are predictable, markets are predictable, that organizations are bounded and they can be analyzed in isolation, that risk is reduced through better data, and that we can optimize a single part of the system. These are inherited in the ways that we plan, that we strategize, and that inform a lot of our management theory. But the actual conditions in which organizations operate are that they are always operating in interlinked crises. Every intervention ripples through the wider system. Uncertainty cannot be reduced by data alone. And we always have to think about how can we position the system for a range of possible responses. And for that, I think the work we are doing brings creative and imaginative ideas. Concluding. So, where does this take us to, and what does this mean for worlds in the making? I think being able to collaborate in this way with these ideas allows us to walk on the path on the road less traveled. But this road is one that I would choose beyond any other, and where the possibilities for creativity and emergence and making worlds with each other and different worlds is the one that inspires me. I'd like to come to the acknowledgements. And here I'm also going to stick a little bit to my notes. I'd like to thank Paul, who is not here with us tonight, and the philosophy department who gave me my first intellectual home. I remain deeply grateful to Paul, whose generosity and intellectual courage changed my understanding of both complexity and philosophy. And after Paul's death, Jannie Hofmeyr ensured that the conversations continued and introduced me to biological complexity and relational thinking, and stood by us all and held the space for us for the Center of Complex Thinking in Transition or Sustainability, CST, that we have now. Yeah, that's the reason why we changed the name. Is where it is. Thank you, Jannie, also for being here and for your deep, deep courage in being with us and holding us. Appreciate that. Mark Swilling, you gave me a place to learn and experiment at the Sustainability Institute in Lyendoch. The Center for Sustainability Transitions has been my academic home for many years, but it's at the Lyendoch, at the Sustainability Institute, where we started experimenting with what does it mean to live complexity? How do we teach complexity and sustainability in a very experimental way? How do we sit and roll with each other? And for your vision and for your passion in that, thank you very much. The Center for Sustainability Transitions has been my home. Unsi and Tanya, thank you so much for shaping my scholarship and for your friendship and support in many, many ways. Nina Callahan, co-director, who's on sabbatical, thank you very much for being here and for the new breath of life that you've brought to us, for your sensibilities, your energy, your love, and for teaching us how to breathe and move and live with complexity. Thank you so much. I'm deeply grateful to Amanda October, to Cornelia Jacobs, and the entire administrative team that's with us and has been with us. Also our new colleagues, thank you so much for the short time that we've been together and for the real support that you bring in our lives. I'm equally fortunate to share this journey with wonderful students. Every MPhil and PhD student willing to wrestle with complexity, uncertainty, and emergence has shaped my own thinking. Teaching has never been a one-way process. The real learning emerges through what happens between us in the class. Thank you very much for that. Last but not least, I'm thinking of my parents, Carl and Queenie, who aren't here. To share in this day, they taught me resilience long before I had a language for it. I'm deeply grateful to my siblings and my extended family who are here. It's lovely to have you here. I'm the last. Your story of our family will be different than my story, but I usually say I'm the last of 8 kids or children, and I'm the latest or the last one. My younger brother is usually, I'm telling, 15 years older than me, but he's my youngest brother, and he's also here, Gordon. Thank you for being my baby brother. Marina and Dion, thank you so much for being here as well, and for holding the history of our family and all the many family fests that we've had in the past. Those closest to me, thank you for sharing the lived complexities of this journey and for exploring it with me through all the caregiving and loss, the new homes, the everyday demands, and the unexpected adventures. Especially I think of Wolfgang and for your friendship. Thank you so much. I think of those who are online with whom I've had extremely beautiful adventures and who shaped my thinking and my being here in this world very deeply. I think of you, Brian. Thank you very much for being my soul companion and for allowing me also to see complexity from so many different perspectives. And lastly, Richard, thank you for keeping curiosity and wonder alive in my life, and also for checking on the fonts of the slides. You don't want Richard, he's got a very good eye for design, and you don't want him to say, Mom, those fonts, ooh, they're not cool. Thank you so much. His sense of style and wonder is impeccable. So we may continue to move with and beside one another, following the wild paths wherever they lead. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're allowing for questions for 10 minutes, and I will field them. So there's going to be a microphone, and you're welcome to ask me difficult questions. Current, did you have a question? There's the microphone. Lovely to see you. Current and Amanda also have a young baby. Thank you for all the moms who are here and for arranging.
Thank you very much, Rika, for the very informative. I couldn't miss this lecture for anything. I just have one question. If there's one thing that you changed or have done better throughout your academic journey where you are right now, can you please share if there's one thing?
Be reincarnated as Unsi. No. No, that's a very difficult question to answer, Current, but it's a good question. So I think if there's one thing I could change just for people online in my journey, it would really be to have a better sense of myself in this space and to believe in the ideas and the journey itself. I think many of us come into this space, feel overwhelmed and often feel like an imposter. But maybe to have a better sense of myself and to understand who I am in this space and to have an idea of what is possible. Not just I think I've often gone about things about haphazardly without a plan. Planning helps, I would say that. I don't do spreadsheets, as you would know, but planning definitely helps, and being open for the plans to change. Maybe that's more important than anything, is being open and not disappointed if the plans change and your expectations of the plans that you might have had of yourself. To have the courage to be with what comes your way. Yeah. Nina.
Thank you, Rika. In our work, we have to look at very difficult things. Yeah. And it can break your heart sometimes. And I'm always amazed at your ability to feel buoyed by your explorations, by your teaching, by your research, because I don't have that buoyancy. And I wonder how you come to think about hope Mark and I often argue about this. He's an outcomes-based guy, apparently, and I'm not. And I wonder where you sit on the spectrum of hope that we all struggle with to figure out in this complex adaptive system what that looks like, feels like, and what we could hope for. What do you hope for?
Thanks, Nina. Yeah. In the field currently, I would say, of change making and transitions or sustainability, the notion of hope has become quite a mantra, I would say. I listened recently to a talk in Barcelona. Someone offered a talk called Hopetopia. Often we use the word hope as a plaster for, as a kind of a simple answer to say, well, don't worry about all the awful things, we should just hope. But that's a very shallow and cheap and false hope, I would say. So I would like to give hope something radical, something really deep that asks something from us, not passive hope. Hope can often be something that we aspire to very passively. But some people are writing and are offering ideas about the notion of active hope, which means that we can start shaping what we hope for. And to do that, it does mean that we have to recalibrate and reorientate ourselves and reattune ourselves to who we are as humans in the world and what we have to face. So to this recalibration of active hope, I would say, is something that I would like to aspire to. I don't have the answers of where we can find that. But also I think it is in, and that's where the work of relational practices for me becomes important, because it's not in, yes, it is in the big policies that we can hope and in our leaders, but it's also in finding the resources within ourselves in the everyday, whether it is through how we see each other, how we interact with each other, how we acknowledge our own difficulties and our vulnerabilities, and sit with difficulties, that we can learn to actively hope with one another. I hope we can explore that with each other. Yeah. Harry, lovely to have you here.
Can you perhaps imagine the next big paradigm?
Next big paradigm.
Can you identify a rebel group?
A rebel group.
Busy thinking about what they could do to improve limitations of what they perceive this paradigm holds.
Yeah.
Have you thought about those things? Also, yeah, used to say, his way of thinking was about the limitations, understanding the limitations of science. Can you understand the limitations of what we do, or what we all are trying to do?
Yeah.
Can you put any kind of a early fingerprint on that?
Difficult question. I think that is, for me, complexity isn't a fix-all framework. What's beautiful about it is that it assumes that, or it says that as soon as we think that we know everything, something will change unexpectedly, so that we cannot have our finger on it or control it or embrace it fully. It will always change in ways that we should be open for and not expect. And it doesn't have to be something big and huge as AI or fancy as that. It can be something really small in our expectations, even in traffic or in how we deal with each other. But I do think the relational paradigm, understanding relations, and there's new work coming out on relational intelligence, and we have some people in the room that's working on relationality in many different ways. Understanding what it means to be with each other, I think, is really, for me, going to be one of the biggest challenges going forward. In sustainability science, I would say also for a very long time, people are saying, apart from hope, that the answer will lie in collaboration. So if you look at many of the IP-based and big assessments, a lot of the solutions that they offer for going forward is in collaboration. But if we look at just the everyday, we assume that humans know how to collaborate, but we don't really get any training as to how to collaborate at all. It's often quite of the most difficult things to do, but we assume we know how to do that. So learning how to be with each other and ourselves, I think going forward is going to be one of the big things. So Stanford Innovation Review just came out with something called relational intelligence, something that they want to study. And going forward in the time of artificial intelligence, I think that's going to be quite important. I'm not sure what kind of science we're going to need for that, what kind of instruments, what kind of measurements. But it is something that we're going to have to dig very deep into to see how we will go forward together.
Is there any other question before we finish? Oh yeah, there's one more.
Alta.
So you can take that.
Thanks, Rika. I'm going to continue the trajectory of easy questions. I was so interested when you said that one of the things that you would change would be like a sense of yourself in the space, because one of the things that I've always really appreciated about you is how, you know, you're not afraid to frame things in a different way, or to say something that's counter to what everyone else is thinking. And I was just wondering how you help, especially also for others in the space, chanting unconventional charts and walking wild paths, how you help both that humility and being unsure of yourself together with that bravery, like how you navigate that, you know, spaces in that way, maybe for others who also have such a big contribution to make, but don't always feel so sure of themselves.
I was hoping for data questions, modeling, certainty, all these kinds of things. Yeah, I think a lot of self-questioning is part of the journey. A lot of wondering about yourself, wondering about the next step. A little bit often. It feels like Frodo carrying the ring into Mordor, not thinking about Lord of the Rings there. You know, not planning actually to do this thing in a very profound way, and it often feels that there are blueprints out there that allows us to maybe, or that tell us that we should be in a specific way, and that's the way of success. I've been really, really fortunate to be in a space of a lot of safety and a lot of friendship. And I think it's really through being in spaces where we build friendships with each other. We not only work together, but we drink wine together, or we eat together, and we jump together, work together, wash dishes together, where we see each other not only as academic machines or as academic achievers, but as really as humans, where the possibility for faith and hope and courage emerges, I think. And the CST has been a beautiful space for that. And I'm not sure many other people, in other academic spaces allows for that. So with all its crazy quirkiness and rules and whatever it is that we conjure up to be together, I think allowing ourselves to see each other in many different ways is a way for us to be able to connect with each other and give ourselves that space where we can believe in ourselves.
Great. So, we can give a clap. So, I'll also ask a question. Maybe I was happy to see some equations and some data, so that was at least refreshing. I must say the questions were very hard that you asked, actually. I wanted to ask you, so as UNESCO co-chair as well, and then also when we look at sustainability, we think about it in terms of also the Sustainable Development Goals, which go up to 2030. So what's the next thing? Is there going to be, I think in the work that you're doing, what will be the next measure of sustainability on a global platform? What does that look like for the future?
What was it again? We'll workshop that. Yeah. I think for us, the Sustainable Development Goals has given us an important platform to think about sustainability, but our approach really is not that these are goals to be reached, that are static, and that's why our name is Center for Sustainability Transitions, because for us, these goals are just pointers in the air, in a sense. They are ideals, they call us to some better world. But we realize that these goals mean something different for Africa, it means something different for Europe. The measurables or the criteria for them in those different spaces are totally different. So for us, it's really, the Sustainable Development Goals are criteria to kind of say, well, they will always be changing as time and space goes on. And we need to be able to kind of see what it is that we need to do now, what is needed in our space and time now, and what are the different measurables and criteria that we need to be able to be relevant for Africa. So a lot of the work that we do with the UNESCO chair is to come up with different ideas of what does development mean even, whilst we have to also be sustainable, which is something that Europe doesn't have to do. So we have different challenges. So for us, it's really about coming up with models, frameworks, criteria that bring these realities into space.
Thank you very much. So colleagues, join me in saying thank you very much to Professor Rika Preiser for a truly thoughtful and provoking, of course, inspiring lecture on worlds in the making, research on complexity and transformative change. So on behalf of the Rectorate of Stellenbosch University, I want to extend again our congratulations on this significant milestone in your academic career. It was mentioned earlier, we have these inaugural lectures because they do mark, of course, an important milestone in the journey of the professor and in the journey of course, of the university, but they also give us an engagement platform with our faculty and the public as well. And it's good to see students, and I think that also is really something that we want to promote as a university, engagement beyond just the academics. And today, you've explained the lecture so that we all understand, even those not in the field. I did have another question, but I didn't ask because I wanted to find out, so if you want to get into this field, do you have to have a physics degree, a maths degree, or economics degree? Or can it be just any degree and then you come in? Because me and Nicola must join this group. So Professor Nicola Smith is our Chief Operations Officer, and I know we've had many complexities. I think we would do better to get into so we can be your students in the near future. But thank you very much once again. So of course, this evening you've invited us to consider a fundamental proposition that challenges confronting society cannot be understood, of course, through simple, linear explanations. Instead, we inhabit a world characterized by interdependence, uncertainty, emergence, and continual transformation. So through, of course, your exploration of complexity, social-ecological systems, and futures thinking, you challenge us to embrace, of course, intellectual humility while remaining committed to the meaningful action. So from my side, I think we had a lot of questions and discussions, and then I know our team prepared a very nice script for me so that I could follow the instructions to keep the standards, but I'll not read that, it's a few pages. I will skip everything and then just maybe go to the end to say that, so again, we really want to congratulate you on your achievement. We want to also acknowledge, the family, friends, the faculty, and all of you are here, the students and colleagues, and those of us, the colleagues joining online, as well as the team that has helped to prepare this lecture. So with those few words, once again, congratulations, and we wish you, of course, the best in the next trajectory. And and thank you for sharing, and also for really giving us, inspiring us to do more than we actually do, to think sustainably. Thank you so much. So we have the ceremony. So this is the short part of the ceremony from the rectorate. There's gold in here. So actually, no, well, so we use this here just to acknowledge and appreciate the lecture. So a small ceremony there, and then we'll be done.
Thank you, Prof. Moyer, and of course, thank you, Professor Preiser, for your thoughtful lecture. We know you as a thoughtful colleague, and it really shone through in tonight's lecture. You've provoked a lot of thought, and I think you inspired a lot of people to think differently. So you challenged us about uncertainty, relationships, complexity, transformation. You reminded us that some of the most important questions facing society cannot just be reduced. We're often very reductionist in what we do. We want simple answers, we want simple methods, and I think you challenged us out of that comfort zone. We require curiosity. You mentioned collaboration quite significantly. We need to imagine, we need to have a willingness to really see new lenses. And you also shared how you developed new lenses throughout your academic career. So in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences, we've got this little slogan, transforming the economy and society. Maybe we need to say navigating transitions, or to really teach us, because I think you challenged us in your last few slides, how our traditional models might need some rethinking. And maybe you can challenge us even more as we take on this journey together inside the faculty. So thank you very much. So Rika, on behalf of the faculty, thank you for sharing this journey with us. We hope to share more of our side with you too, and to really make this a collaborative journey as you've suggested. Congratulations once again on this real significant milestone in your journey, and we're really pleased that so many people could join us here tonight. So we would like to thank your family, whom you mentioned so prominently, your friends, also your many colleagues who are your clear supporters here this evening, your collaborators, and everybody who's really walked the path with you. As you've suggested, there's a path to walk together. We also would like to thank the rectorate who's represented here this evening, also the deans of various faculties who joined us both in person and online this evening. We would like to thank everybody also who made this evening a particular success, from Advancement Stakeholder Engagement and Communication, Amira Brown, and her team for their efforts, and also the supporting faculty in arranging tonight's celebrations. We also want to thank Giola Bergman for her visual communication guidance and implementation, Justin Alberts for his expert audiovisual guidance. I don't think we would have had an online audience tonight without that, so thank you very much. From the Registrar's Responsibility Center, specifically Jonathan Dale Blankenberg, who's you've all seen in the background here today and also in the foreground, for managing this professorial inaugural lecture process from the very beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me once again more in congratulating Professor Rika Preiser. We now invite you to join us for some refreshments and definitely a lot more conversation in the foyer. And before we conclude, I kindly ask that you please rise once more. The academic procession will leave the hall led by Professor Rika Preiser. Thank you very much.
you.